Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me. In my series Freemasonry and Satanism, a continuation of this book. Series number 83, and this will be part 3. America's Secret Establishment. An introduction to the Order of the Skull and Bones. So I guess you could call this is the death head, the skull and crossbones. Established in 1882. Antony Sutton, the author, well known, well respected. I guess we couldn't call him a liar, and we could say he was a thorough researcher. And what he has to say, since I've been reading this book, is amazing. You tell people about the skull and bones, the secret societies, that John Kennedy, President Kennedy, warned us about, saying there was a secret establishment operating behind the scenes, which was repugnant to the way of life in the United States of America. I've gone over a lot of books in my videos, hundreds of hours of videos I made. We've talked about the secret creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913 by the Rothschilds and the other banksters who were mainly Jewish. There's a clear agenda for a new world order and a new age. All the politicians, even the Pope at the Vatican, has said those words. The CIA was established by these people. The Constitution clearly places we, the people, as the supreme authority. We elect our leaders. And if we're not happy, we elect other leaders. And if they're doing wrong, we impeach them and get them thrown out of office. Arrest them for crimes. On the other hand, communism, or this New World Order, the stuff written by even the Jewish people in the Talmud, or Professor Higger's book I've gone over, The Jewish Utopia, the Zionist documentation, communist documentation, socialism, all this is basically sugar-coated communism, and all that is all a disguise for the world empire building. These people want that kind of a government where the government is supreme. So you can't have it both ways. Either the people are going to be supreme and we're going to keep the Constitution, or we're going to allow this new age, this new world order, this communism that's going to come about because they're using all kinds of fake propaganda. Global warming, sustainability, biodiversity, overpopulation, terrorism, economic crisis, plagues, terrors, comets, earthquakes. They have super high-tech weapons, HARP systems, sky spraying, biological cloning, eugenics, Monsanto, modified foods, vaccines that hurt people. And apparently the ongoing sky spraying and fluoride helps to make people lethargic, dumb them down, stupid, zombies. So what's it got to do with this book? Well, I've been reading this. And for those out there, people who are investigating or watching TV, the news, or reading the newspaper, and who want to chuckle when you say that there's a conspiracy and that there's people operating behind the scenes to do bad things to we the people. So people who are chuckling about that, laughing about that, and when you read this book, it's an eye-opener. I suggest anybody go get this book. You can probably find it on a used book site if you can't find it at a major bookstore. So I'm just gonna, I read, my last video went up to page 35. And I'm reading so far up to page 111. So I'm not going to read from 35 to 92 on this video, review it. I'm going to jump right up ahead and briefly tell you what I did read, which was thoroughly explained. What I did read for the past 100 years, as Eustace Mullins said in his book, Murder by Injection, 1910, 1920, the Rockefellers were taking over the medical establishment in the United States. There was a reason for that. Well, it's much worse than that. They were intensely taking over the educational institutions of the United States also. The charitable institutions. Of course, politics with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they control that. Only these people from the secret mystery school organizations, Skull and Bones, Freemasons, Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commissions, Club of Rome, Bilderberger Groups, Bohemian Grove, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, and many more of these Freemasonic organizations. Only people who come out of these things, who have proven to be of value to these New World Order folks, get into office, get nominated for the Supreme Court, get to be a senator, get to be a House of Representatives, a president, a vice president. And then a lot of people who get into these elections who don't win, no worries, it's all a facade. They get appointed to ambassadorships and all kinds of other jobs. Like Michael Chernoff, who was appointed to Homeland Security, who was an Israeli USA dual citizen. Banachek, Alan Greenspan, Jewish people who were USA citizens. And no matter where you live in the world, generally speaking, if you're Jewish, your main allegiance is towards Israel, not the country that you live in. And these people, generally speaking, not all Jewish peoples, of course, I learned what I know because of some very famous Jewish authors who were exposing this stuff. In the series I made on this Freemasonry and Satanism, number 66 to 71, I went over some books like Bloody Zionism and Jack Bernstein's book, an American Jew moves to Israel, he tells all. William Robinson, I think it was, who wrote about the Jewish Utopia, written by Professor Higgins, they tell all. I've gone over the Protocols of Zion, it tells all. It matches the protocols they found by an Illuminati courier in Germany who crashed, and the police found him in his pouch. And so at that time in Germany and all over Europe, the Freemasonic lodges were all shut down. They were forced to close. But time passes. People forget. And the snake is back at it. So let's see what the snake is doing in this book. Page 92. Antony Sutton. There's no mistake in his credibility. 16 books and 25 years in basic research. I thought I heard it all. The world was a confused mess, probably beyond understanding and certainly beyond salvation. And there was little I could do about it. That's what he says. So let's see what he says here. Unbelievable, the sinister activity behind the scenes to take over the American educational system. Right down to grade school, middle school, colleges, everything. And they were intentionally mind-controlling people. Their universities, their institutions, those elites would go to college and discuss things like philosophy, the meaning of life, higher education, mathematics, sciences. But for the rest of us, they had this program called Look See. It was some kind of program they developed for the deaf and dumb, so that they could communicate with the rest of us. Look See. So they would show them pictures, and I guess they would grunt out some kind of vowels for cat, or dog, or house. Look See. Well, it worked so well, they thought they would use this teaching method on the rest of us that are not deaf and dumb or mentally challenged. They wanted the educational system to just give us enough information and programming. In other words, teach gobbledygook, but programming so that we would be able to work in the workforces, farming, factories, street sweeper, sewer plant, jobs, store clerk, bus driver. They did not want us to have philosophical thinking and ideas. That's number one that I'm learning from this book. Number two, this guy named Hegel come up with some idea over in Germany, and it's called the Hegelian philosophy or theory. And so us dumb people who have been taught the look-say method of education through the cartoons, through the books that they publish for the school systems, they wanted to bring about some kind of Hegelian, I can't say the word correctly, I'm sure I'll pronounce it right in a minute, dialect, which was basically in order to bring about the New World Order, they would do things and blame it on somebody else. They would create an event. And we've all seen this already, like 911, that they created, the same people in charge here who took over the educational system, the medical system, the economic system, the political system, everything. These same people did 911. And again, the Hegel philosophy is action causes reaction. So they couldn't muster up the people in the United States, our opinions in the polls, or our support, to go to war against the Middle East, pretty much annihilate the citizens, bomb the smithereens out of the buildings. You should go look at this on the internet. They just, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, everywhere, bombing the buildings to smithereens, killing the people, machine gunning them out of helicopters. Bombs launched, gases, all kinds of things, destruction, stealing the oil wells, the land wealth, the gold, the artifacts in the museums. Why? So 911 enabled them to get public opinion so they could go do this. That's the Hegel philosophy. And is action-reaction. So whenever they want to do something, and they know the public will not support it, they create an event. Like the Boston bombing, Sandy Hook school shooting. Then when they go back to Congress, and they say, you need to vote for more gun controls, the congressmen, the representatives will do it because of that action. So that's where we are. They have the American people dumbed down intentionally, and they have this philosophy on how to bring about the New World Order by the Hegelian, I'm going to say that right, philosophy. They call it dialectic. There's books written about it. But let me read from this book. And after everything I've said, this book will make more sense. Around the turn of the century, the order had made significant penetration into the educational establishment. Remember, this is Antony Sutton, a well-respected author. By utilizing the power of members in strategic positions, they were able to select, groom, and position non-members with similar philosophy and activist traits. So they were doing all this communism activity, which is a disguise for basically stealing the world's wealth and taking away freedom from the rest of us and our ability to think correctly, philosophize, understand reality, and not have a myopic view, which they are trying to get the people to see because of some action they created. The terrorists are coming. The terrorists are coming. The dollar's going to crash. The dollar's going to crash. You have to take a vaccine because there's a plague coming. A plague coming. Global warming. We're all going to die. It's going to get too hot. Sustainability. Biodiversity. Overpopulation. You get it? So then the people get a myopic view. They don't see the whole thing. They don't want people to see the whole thing. I was watching a video the other day, and this one guy explained it. He goes, in the colleges these days, they're telling the students to report on other students that talk bad about the government, that dislike the government. Anti-government belligerents, what they call them. So they want other students to turn these students in. This is pre-Germany, happening right now in 2016 in the USA. It's coming. Obama didn't execute some executive orders to increase gun control because he was just being silly. There's a purpose. The Pope came to the USA recently. This is March 2016. And he said global warming was an emergency. Obama said global warming was an emergency. There's a plan. So anyways, these people from these skull and bone secret societies at Yale University and the Freemasonic lodges, Rosicrucian and all these other organizations, it is all intentional. If there's any point I'm making in my hundreds of hours of videos and hundreds of books and read magazines, hundreds of videos, thousands I've watched, thousands of press releases, essays I've written, comments I've gotten back from other people, I'm convinced there's an insidious plan being unfolded. And we people have been programmed to only worry about ourselves, and they create the economic situation so people are just striving just to get somewhere. Everybody wants a little piece of the pie. A house, a car, a wife, some children. The good life. But they keep it right out of reach, so the people never get there. And since they took over the Federal Reserve in 1913, Christmas time, and then 6 months later they started World War I. Every time that people do build up some wealth, they crash it. They call it bubbles, depressions, recessions, whatever. And they do this intentionally because they control the Federal Reserve. So 8 or 9 times since 1913, when families, husbands and wives with children and grandparents and their kids, they would build up a nice little nest egg and some personal family wealth. They would crash the system and all would be lost. So generation, every 10, 15, 20 years, they allow it and they crash it. And they allow it and they crash it. And they allow it and they crash it. Intentional. And if you go get this book and read it, it's a sad awakening to realize the intent behind the scheming of these people. While in Berlin, White acted as recruiting agent for the order, Skull and Bones Order. Not only G. Stanley Hall came into his net, but also Richard Ely, founder of the American Economic Association, Daniel Gilman, as we noted in the last memorandum, was president of Johns Hopkins and used that base to introduce Wotan philosophy into the U.S. educational system. That would be a philosophy from the Mr. Hegel, which was from Germany. And one of the philosophies was the Wotan. And after retirement from Johns Hopkins, Gilman became the first president of the Carnegie Institution of Washington, D.C. They use these philanthropic charitable institutions, huge amounts of monies that part of these people who they accumulated it because they were insiders with the order. And then when they die, they leave all their money to a trust, a foundation. And then they use that trust and foundation to control the social direction of the United States using that philosophy of Mr. Hegel of action-reaction. And at the same time, as we're going to see in this book, if I ever get to reading it, that they control the educational system with serious intent. They were messing with our minds and our children's minds and their children's minds and their children's minds on purpose, with a goal in mind. Now let's see how the order moved into more specific, specialized fields of education. And then we need to examine how the order fits with John Dewey, the source of modern American educational philosophy, and then how the order spread Dewey throughout the system. Founding of the American Economic Association. Academic associations are a means of conditioning or even policing academics. And if an academic fails to get the word through his peer group, there is always the threat of not getting tenure. So they could prevent a teacher from getting tenure, which apparently is, I guess, continuing in the educational field in some kind of retirement. In other words, what is taught at university levels is passed through a sleeve. So what is taught at the universities is approved of material by these people from Skull and Bones, the Death Head, who want to bring about a new world order. The sleeve is faculty conformity. In this century, wherein faculties are larger, conformity cannot be imposed by a president. It is handled equally well through faculty tenure committees and publication committees of academic associations. So if you're a teacher and you're not playing ball, teaching the USA people what and how they want you to teach, they can ruin you. Same thing with politics, politicians and politics. The people who get put into those elected positions at the Senate and the representatives, federal-wise and statewide, and the governors and the presidents, generally speaking, have been approved of. And of course, the average Joe out there, or Mary, can't get in because, first of all, you probably don't have millions of dollars to compete. And if somebody did rise up in the public to become popular, as we're seeing now with Donald Trump, the people who control the media and the world try to destroy them. And I'm not a huge fan of Donald Trump. I think there's several things wrong with him. But if you have to look at the half dozen or dozen evil people vying to be president, he appears to be the least evil. Sad we have to look at it that way. Alright, so anyways, the achievements of the Trochia. So, Daniel Gilman, 1856, founded Russell Trust, the Order Yale librarian. And President, University of California, President, Johns Hopkins University, President, Carnegie Institution. So this would be Daniel Gilman of the Skull and Bones Order. Basically, it's a subsidiary, in my opinion, of the Illuminati. And if you don't know what the Illuminati is, it's basically a bunch of people who are initiated into a secret organization that is literally 1,000, maybe 2,000 years old. Mentioned in many books for hundreds of years. I think it came out in the open in 1776, the same year the USA declared independence. And it was Adam Mustafa who made it public, or at least announced it to the groups within that finally became public, at the behest of Rothschilds and the other banksters. So the Illuminati basically was a consolidation all of the Masonic, Freemasonic lodges, and other secret mystery school of Babylon institutions throughout the world. And when I've gone over those books, the New Age, published by these Scottish Rite Freemason temples. So it has a little chart here, having little, if anything, to do with their abilities. So these people who were put in charge of our educational institutions, it was not because of their academic skills or accomplishments. It was because they come from the secret mystery school of Babylon, Skull and Bones, Illuminati orders. The order incorporated in 1856. I'm trying to make another point here. This stuff goes back a long time. These people trying to take over the world operate on a 100 or 200 year timetable. For most citizens out there who are poorly educated, it's hard to fathom this. And then when they have the Hegelian philosophy of cause and effect, all these things that splash in the news, bombing, shootings, buildings, and all this stuff, wars and murders and assassinations, it distracts everybody. It doesn't keep people focused on what's going on. It's always they're doing something over here, while over in this hand they create something everybody to look at. It's things they don't want you to know. So Andrew White, University of Berlin, President Cornell University, U.S. Ambassador to Berlin, Timothy Dwight, University of Berlin, Yale Theological Seminary. So what Antony Sutton is trying to point out is that you can connect the dots of these people from the order and the positions they're put in. Moving on. We have already noted that member Andrew Dixon White founded and was president of the American Historical Association. So they have control of the American Historical Association. I'm aware they're controlling the Smithsonian Institute. And we all know about other black op projects and the men in black, like in the UFO situations, or CIA, FBI, all these organizations working for these elites, targeting the U.S. citizen and world citizen. Even what now, with the president having the authority to have anybody assassinated, deemed a threat to the New World Order, and therefore was able to influence the Constitution and direction of the AHA, the American Historical Association. This has generated an official history and ensured that existence of the order is never even whispered in history books, let alone school text. Don't I need to remind anybody, but the major newspapers are owned by these media people who control the world with these two things about dumbing down we the people and the Hegelian philosophy of cause and effect. They make us all believe something by creating an explosion here or there. Like World War I, when the United States was predominantly behind Germany, supporting Germany. Had no reason to be against Germany. But Woodrow Wilson was under their control. The same people here of the order, which would also include the Zionist Jewish folks, the banksters, which are probably behind everything, in cahoots with sinister people behind the kings and queens in the Vatican. Don't want to leave any of the guilty parties out of this picture. So Woodrow Wilson declared war on Germany after a ferry sunk off the coast of Britain, saying that 37 Americans were killed. Later, after we went into war, it was discovered that the ferry never sank. So they intentionally brought the USA into World War I against Germany because Britain was losing the war. And Rothschilds made a deal with Mr. Balfour of England that if they brought money to Britain to turn the tide in the war, and the USA to support Britain in the war, then Britain would support annexing the Palestinians' land for the new state of Israel. It's all a plan, all tied together here. And it's focused on dumbing down the American people, having people, I guess, not being able to actually think, to philosophize, to see the big picture. They keep everything in a myopic little window with their cause and effect Hegelian dialectic philosophy. And economic association is also of significance. So they got the historical association, they got the economic association, Chamber of Commerce is all that. Because it conditions how people who are not economists think about the relative merits of free enterprise and state planning. State economic planning is an essential part of the state political control. So I'll say it once again. The Constitution says, we people are supreme. The government officials work for us. In communism, the state is supreme, and the people do what they're told and work for the state. Make no mistake, this is what's coming. The collectivist nature of present-day college faculties in economics has been generated by American Economic Association under the influence of the order, Skull and Bones. There are very few outspoken preachers of the Austrian School of Economics on American campuses today. They have effectively weeded out even Ludwig von Mises, undisputed leader of the school, was unable to find a teaching post in the United States. So much for academic freedom in economics. And it speaks harshly of the pervasive, deadening, dictatorial hand of the American Economics Association and the controlling hand as in the American Psychological Association. Do you see what I'm saying? All these associations they took control of. Remember, they controlled the Federal Reserve since 1913, the American money system. They basically controlled our country since then, our politicians since then. The Psychological Association, the Economic Association, the Educational Association, the Medical Association, Historical Association. This book's written by a much smarter guy than me. I just read and report, and this book stunned me to the extent of how they have dumbed down and played the American citizen for a fool. And I suppose they're probably doing it in Europe and the world. We know since 1900, 1920, 1940, 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990, there have been presidents all over the world assassinated, dethroned. Panama, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, all the craziness going on in South America, Africa, Middle East, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi in Libya, Egyptian president, even that president recently in Ukraine. There is a plan going on, a worldwide plan. All right, back to the book. Eli descended from Rich I. Eli of Plymouth, England, who settled at Lyme, Connecticut in 1660. So these people belonging to the secret mystery school of Babylon, basically a Luciferian secret associations with initiation rites and all kinds of other ghoulish activities. Go look up Alex Jones in Bohemian Grove and see for yourself what they do. Go look up Arizona Wilder and David Icke and see what she says they do in the Illuminati meetings with apparently some dude called Pindar who can actually shapeshift into a reptilian creature. You might think that's far-fetched, but do a little research. They do talk about the demons from beneath the earth or wherever, the demonic angels, and they talk about angels in the Bible. There's all kinds of psychic research and paranormal material out there. People having after death experiences coming back to life and out-of-body experiences. So there's little doubt that there's more to our reality, and it might behoove we the people to try to get a handle on that. and not be ignoramuses and zombies and allow these people to take away our right to think and to design our own reality. Do we really want a reality based on casinos, chaos and anarchy, Mad Max, Hunger Games the movie, Divergent, grand, perverted, homosexual, transgender, pedophilia, reality, adulterous? Do we really want that? Do these people want that? Eli also comments that he never could understand why he always received a welcome from the U.S. Embassy in Berlin, in fact, from the ambassador himself. But the reader has probably guessed what Eli didn't know. White was the order's recruiter in Berlin. All right, moving on. So somebody who read this book before me did some writing. My highlighting is the yellow. Somebody did some writing in this. When I buy these books on used book sites, some of them are marked up. But they made an interesting comment here. I'll read it. But they call them free trade agreements to get them passed through into law. So there was the Atlantic Trade Agreement, and then there was the Pacific Trade Agreement, the second one. And these treaties that they sign override constitutional law. So these people from the order are making these treaties obligations and laws that affect we the people without our knowledge or permission, and it's all done in secret. Now one has to ask, do you think they're doing something beneficial for us? Or are they trying to bring about their new world order for them? As I continue reading here, and if you go get the book, you'll see that they've been working feverishly to, I guess, create a world where we people, non-Jewish people, non-initiated people, non-Illuminati, non-Masonic, non-Mystery School of Babylon, non-Jesuits, non-King and Queens, that we're all treated like animals. I just want to make my point really clear. That's what they're trying to get away with. And what were these new ideas? Eli rejected classical liberal economics, including free trade, and noted that free trade was particularly obnoxious to the German school of thought by which I was so strongly impressed. In other words, just as G. Stanley Hall had adopted the Hegelian, I can't say the word, Hegelianism in the psychology, here's the word, made after that guy, Mr. Hegel. From Walt, who was another guy teaching the same philosophy, where my finger is. Eli adopted Hegelian ideas from his prime teacher, Karl Kaives, at the University of Heidelberg. Now, again, to make my point really clear, what is this Hegelianism or Walt philosophy? It's a philosophy where the state is supreme. And all the people work for the state. The Constitution in the United States says the people are supreme, and the people we elect and put in charge, sheriffs, senators, mayors, presidents, work for us. So it's a battle for these two philosophies. And both Americans had come to the watchful attention of the order. The staff of the U.S. Embassy in Berlin never did appreciate why a young American student not attached to the embassy was hired by the Ambassador White to make a study of the Berlin city government. Just stuff to think about. The rest is history. Daniel Gilman invited Richard Ely to Johns Hopkins University. From there, Ely went on to head the Department of Economics at the University of Wisconsin. Through the ability to influence choice of one's successor, Wisconsin had been a center of statist economics down to the present day. Financing for projects at University of Wisconsin came directly from the order. Ely also tells us about his students and was especially enthralled by Woodrow Wilson. You see? We knew we had in Wilson an unusual man. There could be no question he had a brilliant future. Well, as we can see from George Bush Jr. and Bill Clinton, when you show yourself to be an able, controllable hand of the demonic types that control the world, then they will elevate you right to the top. If you've got no qualms about turning on your country, turning on Christianity, and serving the dark side. I said that. So they thought Woodrow Wilson had a brilliant future. So they controlled him, the order. And that's why they made him president, because the previous president would not go along with the order, with the Illuminati, with the Zionists, with the Jesuits, with the Vatican, with the presidents, king and queen, with England. So they said that's no problem. And they controlled the Federal Reserve. I think Woodrow Wilson had a hand in that. Yeah, it was during his presidency. All his advisors were Jewish folks, FYI. And a lot of other people in Washington, D.C., in the White House, and in the Congress were very upset about that they had all the control and influence over Woodrow Wilson. So you'd think the American people would have been outraged later on to learn that they had schemed and sinister activities to bring the USA into a war. All to get the Palestinians land, to create the state of Israel, to fulfill prophecy. They're trying to fulfill some kind of prophecy in the Bible. And for 100 years, they've been running some program called Aliyah. Go look it up on jpost.com. And through scheming and causing wars and economic destruction and hate, stirring up trouble so people would hate the Jewish people, so that they would go move to Israel. They've done this for 100 years, bringing millions of people to Israel. Meanwhile, of course, they have to kill off all the Arabs in that area. And not only did they manage to take over most of the Palestinians' land, as we are all aware now since 9/11, they pretty much overthrown every country and have bombed the smithereens out of the peoples and their buildings. Those they didn't kill are fleeing to America and the United European Union and other places, causing disruptions of our societies, all intentional, all planned. Years later, Theodore Roosevelt would term Arthur Haley his fellow anarchist and say that if their true views were known, they would be so misunderstood that they would both lose their jobs as President of the United States and President of Yale. I suppose I should repeat that. Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States, would term Arthur Haley his fellow anarchist, anarchy, and say that if their true views were known, they would be so misunderstood that they would both lose their jobs as President of the United States and President of Yale. And I think it was George Bush Sr. who said, if the American people knew what we have done, we would be arrested or run out of something sinister. I mean, something terrible done to them. But he said if the people knew what they were doing, George Bush Sr. House's novel, Philip Drew, was written in New Haven, Connecticut. I suppose that's pretty near Sandy Hook. And in those days, House was closer to the Taft segment of the order than Woodrow Wilson. In fact, House, as we shall see later, was the order's messenger boy. House was also something of a joker because part of the story of the order is encoded in Philip Drew, the book. American Medical Association. Your doctor knows nothing about nutrition. Ask him confidentiality, and he'll probably confess he had only one course in nutrition. And there's a reason for that. On the other hand, a chemical-based medicine was introduced, and the medical profession cuts its ties with naturopathy. So they don't want to heal people using natural means. They're using chemical means. And here's another horrible thought. The name brands on foods are owned by people with those last names. And what did they put in the foods? So these people from the Illuminati, these mysteries, as Fritz Springmeier wrote in his book, you can look this up, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Number one, most of the presidents that we've had in the past in the United States have been related to each other, or the King of England, or King of Spain, or King of England, Germany. Elites, that's the key. So if you look up these name brands, Kellogg's, DuPont, Reynolds, so many, these are these last names of these Illuminati bloodline families. Think about that. Putting fluoride in the water, fluoride in toothpaste, sky spraying, stuff in the vaccines, mercury, causing all kinds of birth defects. Apparently the sky spraying, they're saying one of the purposes is they're slowly making more humans sterile. Here we go with the population agenda again. And wanting to get rid of the people who are non-Jewish DNA, none of these elitists that H.G. Wells said the rest of us were animals not to be trusted. You're trying to sterilize us, the rest of us, so that they can cut down the birth rate of we animals and get rid of the Constitution, because they don't want us to have the philosophy and the thinking capacity to think that we should be supreme and they should work for us. They want to bring about the communist thing where we will beg for food and even beg to live. That's some pretty harsh words. For the moment, we want only to note that the impetus for reorganizing medical education in the United States came from John D. Rockefeller, but the funds were channeled through a single member of the order, the Skull and Bones. And I'm not reading all of this. There's so much. If somebody gets this book and sits down and read it, they're just going to go, oh my God. Other areas of education. We should note in conclusion other educational areas where the order had its influence. In theology, we have already noted that the order controlled the Union theological seminaries. So the order is controlling the religions also. For many years, and was strong within the Yale School of Divinity. The Yale School of Divinity. The Constitution for the United Nations, ESCO, was written largely by the order, i.e. member Archibald MacLeish. And as I keep saying, this man, Antony Sutton, needs no questioning. He knew what he was talking about. We are not developing a theory that includes numerous superficially unconnected events. For example, the founding of Johns Hopkins University the introduction of Wotanian education, methodology, a psychologist, Stanley Hall, an economist, Richard Ely, and politician, Woodrow Wilson. And now we have included such disparate events as Colonel Edward House and the U.S. Navy Observatory. The order links to them all, and several hundred or thousands other events yet to be unfolded. In research, when a theory begins to find support of this pervasive nature, it suggests the work is on the right track. So I'm supposing a lot of people would say, Rick, how much supporting evidence is there? Well, the people that are in charge of Professor of Philosophy, University of Chicago, Professor of Greek and Minister of Greece, Professor of Physics for U.S. Navy Academy, New England Conservatory, Professor of the Greek Center College, President, Western Reserve University, Professor Greek, Balliol College, Connecticut State Legislator, Professor Mathematics, Cornell University. My point is, I'm not going to read all this, but Anthony Sawyer has connected the dots. Members of the order show up everywhere. And it's documented what their intentions are. Another page. He's tracked them all down, right up to 100 years. Like I said, much smarter guy than me. I don't need to say anything to support Antony Sutton. His work and his reputation is beyond dispute. Memorandum number 7, the Order's Objectives for Education. And I'm only reading the highlighted portion. On this page is a lot of highlighted material. We can deduce the Order's objectives for education from evidence already presented, and by examining the work and influence of John Dewey, the arch-creator of modern educational theory. Those educational objectives have not, by and large, been brought about by government action. In fact, if the present state of education had been brought about by legislation, it would have been challenged on the grounds of unconstitutionality. On the contrary, the philosophy and practice of today's system has been achieved by injection of massive private funds by foundations under influence and sometimes control of the Order, Skull and Bones, and the other Illuminati groups. This implementation we will describe in a future volume. How the Order controls foundations. How John Dewey relates to the Order. John Dewey worked for his doctorate at Johns Hopkins University from 1882 to 86 under the Hegelian philosopher George Sylvester Morris. So again, this Hegelian philosophy is that the state is supreme and the people are the slaves and must obey the state. And one of the ways to bring that about is by the cause and effect. Action, reaction. 911, we go to the Middle East and start murdering everybody. Terrorism activities in the United States, we increase the gun control laws. And more spy cameras, more computer monitoring, more everything. More enforcement. Vicious enforcement, as we've all seen by the beatings of people by police officers and pepper spraying college students who are just on their knees as they were told. It's a philosophy versus the Constitution where the people are supreme. So they are using this action-reaction part of the philosophy and to bring about the Hegelian philosophy. I'll get it right eventually. Where the state is supreme. Neither Morris nor Dewey were members of the Order, but the link is clear. Gilman hired Morris, knowing full well that Hegelian is a totally integrated body of knowledge and easy to recognize. It is as different from the British empirical school of John Stuart Mills as day and night. John Dewey's philosophy was taken from G. Stanley Hall, the first American student to receive a doctorate from Wilhelm Wundt at the University of Leipzig in Germany. In brief, philosophy and psychology came to Dewey from academics handpicked by the order. So the Skull and Bones Illuminati order intentionally changed the American educational system so people would fall in line for this new age and this new world order that's coming, where the state is supreme and the people are obedient servants instead of, as the Constitution dictates, the people are supreme and the elected officials are obedient servants. From Johns Hopkins, Dewey went as professor of philosophy to the University of Michigan, and in 1886 published Psychology, a blend of the Hegelian philosophy applied to Wundtian experimental psychology. It sold well, and in 1894 Dewey went to University of College, and in 1902 was appointed director of the newly founded, with Rockefeller money, School of Education. Probably if you read this book it'd make more sense, but it starts to put pieces of the puzzle together. The University of Chicago itself had been founded in 1890 with Rockefeller funds, and in a future volume we will trace through this Frederick Gates of Hartford, Connecticut, and the Pillsbury family, the order. See what I'm talking about? Pillsbury, this is part of the order, produces a lot of food. And they are intentionally messing with our mental capabilities and how and what we think. They're intentionally lowering the IQ, as per a Harvard study. People who drink water with fluoride in it have lower IQs than other people. And if you read several books written by Jewish people, they brag about how they have a higher IQ than the rest of us. And some of them say that they're better than the rest of us. They're the aristocrats of the world. What kind of people worry about that, want to be a duke or a prince, have some kind of title, because they're the aristocrats. We're dealing with some pretty sick people. H.G. Wells says we're animals not to be trusted. The Freemasonic literature, I read all the books, says that the non-initiated into the mystery school of Babylon, which basically they worship Lucifer and many other names, Horus, the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill, Ra, all the Egyptian symbolism, the sun. The rest of us are profane, according to the Freemasonic books. And of course, the Jewish people say that we are goyim, and that means cattle. Put all this together, you get the picture. The University of Chicago and Columbia teaches college were the key training schools for the modern education. The influence of Dewey. Looking back at John Dewey after 80 years of his influence, he can be recognized as the preeminent factor in the collectivization, or Hegelianization of the American schools. So again, this communism is this collectivism. Even according to Hillary Clinton, says that your children are not your children. They are the community's children. Again, we're going towards the communist, where the state is supreme and the people are slaves, versus the Constitution of the United States, which they're trying to destroy, our way of life. This is what's coming with the new age and the new world order. We are supposed to be supreme under the Constitution, and the people who we elect are supposed to be working for us. When the order brought G. Stanley Hall from Leipzig to Johns Hopkins University, John Dewey was already there. waiting to write his doctoral dissertation on the psychology of Kant. Already a Hegelian, how about I'll try to get it right, Hegelian in philosophy, he acquired and adopted the experimental psychology of Wundt. So the Hegelian and Wundt philosophy are the same, and they're from Germany. And they sent people from the United States over to those German schools to learn of these philosophies, where the state is supreme and the people are slaves, versus what the United States people believe, that we are supreme and the state is working for us. So you see what they mentally need to change, and the way they're going to change that is they have to have these proposed threats, these fabricated threats, propaganda threats, created threats, as in that book I went over, the report from Iron Mountain. So they have to have all these issues of fear and threat to us Americans so they can save us, which makes them supreme. If they're going to protect us, they're supreme. I'm reminded of Chicago in the old days when the racketeers would go barge into a restaurant or a store and smash the windows and beat up the owner and say, you have to pay for protection and we'll protect you. So they were the ones who caused the event of where the store was attacked and the owner was beaten. And they're the ones who offered to provide protection. It's nothing different. Experimental psychology of Wundt and Hall, and 2, concept of education for social change. So the experimental psychology of Wundt and Hall to his concept of education for social change. To illustrate this, here's a quote from John Dewey in my Pedagogic Creed. The school is primarily a social institution, education being a social process. The school is simply that form of community life in which all those agencies are concentrated that will be most effective in bringing the child to share in the inherited resources of the race, and to use his own powers for social ends. Education, therefore, is a process of living, not a preparation for a future living. So they want to control the psychology and the way people think through education. And they want people to think that they have to serve the state rather than serving your own end. Remember, they're the ones who think that we're profane, goyim cattle, and as H.G. Wells says, animals not to be trusted. What we learn from this is that Dewey's education is not child-centered, but state-centered. Antony Sutton, a much smarter guy than I got to keep on saying that. This guy, 16 books in 25 years. And this is just one book of many I have. Hundreds of hours of material I've done. 11 years. This is what it all boils down to when you look at this and look at this and look at all the different points of view. You keep seeing what they're doing. State-centered, because of the Hegelian social ends are always state ends. So if you want to know what's going on, the more chaos and anarchy they create, as George Bush Sr. said, the more they have the ability to save us from the chaos and our anarchy. And murdering people, bombing people, even nuking cities, nothing is exempt. The ends justify the means, as they think. Look at all the people bombed to smithereens throughout the Middle East. Unbelievable. If you go on the internet and look at some of those videos. Men, women, and children in their 5-story buildings, hit by a bomb that takes the whole thing down in seconds. Mass murdered them all. World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, Korean War, Iraq a couple times. And men all over the world killing presidents, taking over countries. John Perkins, in his book, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the international money funds and the banksters were sending these people all over the world to convince presidents, kings, and other leaders to borrow money, knowing that they could never pay it back. The Hegelian dialectic, the Hegelian philosophy, the one of won't. That's how they create these situations where they can bring about this enslavement of the people, and they are going to be supreme. And if you read the Jewish book, The Jewish Utopia by Professor Higgins, it's not going to be good. Or the Protocols of Zion, or the Report from Iron Mountain, Who Financed Hitler by the Pools. So many books I've gone over. What we learn from this is that Dewey's educational system is not child-centered, but state-centered. Because of the Hegelian, social ends are always state ends. So as thinking humans, whether you watch my videos or other people and ponder, we need to be thinking, why are they doing the things that they're doing? What are the end results? What's the end game? What do they know that we don't know? What do they have planned for us? What about the Georgia USA Guidestones? It says they want a worldwide population of 500 million. Does that mean 6 billion people have to die? When they're sky spraying those chemicals, we don't know what they put in that chemicals or possibly biological, dried blood, other things. It's all kinds of videos you can look up, and you can always just go outside and look up at the sky and see that they're spraying us like we're bugs. Meanwhile, they're involved in the educational system, creating police-type states everywhere, cities. I was just in St. Louis, and it gave me the creeps. I was on the transit system. You are not to be eating on the train. You will be summoned. You are not to be eating any food or drinking on the train. You will be summoned. Do not throw any trash. You will be summoned. Do not loiter. You will be summoned. Or in the overhead, over and over. Quite the experience. This is where the gulf of misunderstanding between modern parents and the educational system begins. Parents believe a child goes to school to learn skills to use in the adult world. But Dewey states specifically that education is not a preparation for future living. The Dewey educational system does not accept the role of developing a child's talents, but contrarily, only to prepare the child to function as a unit in an organic world. In blunt terms, a cog in the wheel of an organic society. Whereas most Americans have moral values rooted in the individual, the values of the school system are rooted in the Hegelian concept of the state as the absolute. And they hand out condoms to 6-year-old kids in school, show them videos or films about homosexuality and so much more. The state is supreme, and the state is going to dictate, probably eventually, that you can't have a Bible or talk about Christianity. And apparently in the Army manual, you can get court-martialed if you talk about Jesus in the Army. So it's on its way. Watch some of my past videos. The evidence is repeating itself and repeating itself and repeating itself. The stuff you watch on the news clearly shows us. Hillary Clinton. The list is as long as my arm as the things that she should probably be arrested for. Bill Clinton. George Bush's. But yet, they want to make Hillary the next president. This is what this other person who read this book said. This is why we come out of school thinking it is a waste of time. That's what the person who read this book before me made some notes on this book. So they don't want to really educate us as thinkers and scientists and philosophers and people who create things and make the world a better place. They've got other plans, mostly that they want to rid the world of we people who are non-Jewish and non-Mystery School of Babylon people initiated into the secret Mystery School of Babylon. In other words, Luciferians, witchcraft. This is pretty much biblical stuff here. Apparently, Lucifer, Satan, hates humanity. And I suppose anybody watching this video, at least I believe I am, we are humanity. And if we're dealing with these entities that have been on this planet all along, that hates humanity, wants to destroy humanity, least we forget Hitler was into the supreme race. Least we forget the government's into cloning, genetically modifying people, food, animals, everything. They're now planning on trying to create some kind of chip to make a computer think like a human. I was watching a video about that. Unless we people wake up and start using our brain and thinking. For Hegel, the individual has no value, page 103, except as he or she performs as a function of society. Freedom is the participation of every mature human being in formation of the values that regulate the living of men together. This is pure Hegel, i.e., man finds freedom only in obedience to the state. In other words, for Dewey, man has no individual rights. Man exists only to serve the state. Remember, these are the philosophies coming from the order, the Illuminati, the Freemasonic schools, Rosicrucian, all this New Age propaganda, including the gay agenda, Agenda 21, Common Core, Common Purpose, the Patriot Act, so much more. This is directly contrary to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution with the preamble, "We the people." They then go on to define the rights of the state, which are always subordinate and subject to the will of we the people. So the Constitution says we the people. This, of course, is why modern educationalists have great difficulty in introducing the Constitution into school work. So the powers that be that are running our world, our states, our governments, our school system, medical system, economic system, historical system, they want to promote that the state is supreme. It says here, we will never teach the Constitution. Pornography we will teach. Individuals' sovereignty is only as long as it's used in exercise of rights to please, not power. I'm trying to read this person's writing. Students need to develop a sense of community and collective identity. So it says here. An attempt should be made to redress the present overemphasis on individualism in current programs. Educational Leadership, May 1982, William Stanley, Associate Professor, Department of Curriculum, Instructor, Louisiana State University. It takes a village to raise a child. For Hegel, every quality of an individual exists only at the mercy and will of the state. This approach is reflected in political systems based on Hegel, whether it be Soviet communism or Hitlerian National Socialism. John Dewey follows Hegel's organic view of society, for example. Education consists either in the ability to use one's powers in a social direction or else in ability to share in the experience of others, and thus widen the individual's consciousness to that of the race. Just moving on, reading my highlighted portions. I just thought this stuff was important to make a point. A lot of people wonder why they're doing what they're doing. Okay, here's a quote from Assemblyman John Vasconcellos of California, who also happens to be chairman of the Joint Committee on the Master Plan for Higher Education and Educational Goals Committee for the California State Assembly a key post. It is now time for a new version of ourselves, of man, of human nature and human potential, and a new theory of politics and institutions premised upon that vision. What is that vision of man? That the natural, whole, orgasmic human being is loving, that man's basic thrust is towards community. Quoted Rax Miles' Brotherhood in Darkness. Remember, community is communism. Commune. They don't want you to be individual, to be able to go buy some land and start mining for gold or whatever. They don't want individualism and people to have their own thinking and create their own realities. What is this widening the individual consciousness, Dewey, and thrust towards community, Vasconcellius? Stripped of the pandemic language, it is a new world order, a world organic society. But there is no provision for a global organic order within the Constitution. In fact, it is illegal for any government officer or elected official to move the United States towards an order, as it would clearly be inconsistent with the Constitution. To be sure, Dewey was not a government official, but Vasconcellius had taken an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. The popular view of the global order is probably that we had better look after our problems at home before we get involved in those esoteric ideas. Esoteric. It's all about a new world empire, led by these elitists who are into, clearly, a kind of a witchcraft reality. They do sacrifice people. There's been plenty of evidence that I've shown, plenty of witnesses, plenty of videos. Alex Jones, Bohemian Grove, Arizona Wilder, David Icke, and so many more. On my website, rickmiracle.com, I posted a bunch of these videos with all these different witnesses. Miles Johnston in the Basis series. The list is long. We all know about whistleblowers and people who have told the truth, and a lot of them have been murdered. 911 is a great example of the inside job. Israelis dancing and partying on a building in New Jersey, videoing the event. Other Israelis were caught in a white van with explosives. And all those people were released and sent back to Israel and went on TV and bragged about their exploits. And to this day, today, they're just continuing to murder the Palestinians, the Iraqis, Afghanistan, Egyptians, all those people in those countries. They're depopulating that area. They're either moving them into other areas, upsetting social realities in Europe and America, intentionally, as we're reading here. The popular view of a global order is probably that we had better look after our problems at home before we get involved in those esoteric ideas. A lot of people here in the United States, they're oblivious to the death and mayhem going on in the Middle East right now. And we are our brother's keeper, aren't we? Treat your fellow man as you want to be treated is the philosophy that we all want. But that would mean that you're thinking and you don't have the philosophy that the state is supreme and it can murder whoever it wants. Political corruption. We know the government's CIA and other institutions are seriously into the drug trade, economics, oil, all this other stuff. They're robbing us blind and making us, we middle class, are disappearing. Everybody knows this. Political corruption, pitifully low educational standards, and insensitive bureaucracy are probably of a more concern to Americans. I'd say Americans are probably thinking all we have is stupid people running our government, driving everything into the ground. But it's intentional, I'm here to say. It's difficult to see what the New World Order has to do with education of children, but it's there in the literature. As this federation spreads further and gradually embraces the whole earth, perpetual peace begins, the only lawful relation among states. So they want us to believe we have no need for God. As Rabbi Marvin Antleman wrote in his 2 books I've gone over many times, to eliminate the opaque. They don't want people to believe in God and to pray. For one thing, it works. While they're sacrificing human beings to death to get whatever beings, demonic beings behind the scenes, to do their bidding. This is in the Bible. King Solomon in his temple and his magic ring to call forth demons. And lest we forget, CERN, the collider over there in the French-Swiss border in Geneva, with the statue of the goddess of destruction, Shiva, out front, 666 in the logo, and apparently Geneva is the long-term home base for the Illuminati, and the original location, apparently, of the Frankenstein myth. You can't make this stuff up. The National Education Assembly, the Lobby for Education, produces a program for the 1976 bicentennial entitled A Declaration of Independence, Education for a Global Community. And now they got some new websites you can go look up, and billboards even posted. Freedom from religion. It's all planned, I keep saying. I'm telling you why here. They want the state to be supreme and not the people to be supreme. Okay, here we go. On the Education for a Global Community, page 6. We are committed to the idea of education for a global community. You are invited to help turn the commitment into action and mobilize world education for the development of a world community. Not going to be good. The field of community education includes the individual in his total psychophysical structure and his entire ecological climate and all its ramifications. Social, political, economical, cultural, spiritual, etc. It seeks to integrate the individual within himself and within his community until the individual becomes a cosmic soul and the community the world. Page 84 of the same book. Education for a Global Community. The cosmic soul. The whole human race is going to evolve an effective soul of its own. The cosmic soul of the race. This is the future of human evolution. As a result of the emergence of the universal soul, there will be a great unification of the entire human race, ushering into existence a new era, a new dawn of unique world power. This the person who made notes in this book wrote this. And basically, they say the Buddhist will love this. This last quote sounds even more Adolf Hitler than Assemblyman John van Vasconcellius. It has the same blend of the occult and the ethnic and absolutism. You see how all the stuff I'm going is coming full circle? The generally held understanding of the Constitution on the relationship between the individual and the state is that the individual is supreme. The state exists only to serve individuals, and the state has no power except by express permission of the people. This is guaranteed by Amendments 9 and 10 of the Constitution. Amendment 9 reads, "The enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people." Amendment 10 reads, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people." In brief, the proposals of John Dewey and his followers are unconstitutional. They would never have seen the light of day in American schoolrooms unless they had been promoted by the order with its enormous power. Little cartoon in this book. You got the proud parents in the background, and apparently the moronic kid graduating. This is what the order, Mystery School of Babylon, lodges and temples. Remember, Jewish churches are called temples. Masonic lodges are called temples. It says temple right out front if you go look at one of the buildings. All right, I'm trying to finish this up. Memorandum number 8, summary. By the 1870s, the order had Yale University under its control. 1870s. Every president of Yale since Timothy Dwight has either been a member of the order or his family connections to the order. It also appears that some Yale graduates who are not members of the order, Skull and Bones, will act towards objectives desired by the order. Some of these, for example, Dean Acheson, we can identify as members of the Scroll and Key and with relatives in the order. So they had 3 institutions at Yale: the Scroll and Key, the Wolf's Head, and the Skull and Bones. Others yet to be brought into our discussion are members of the Wolf's Head. For example, Reeve, Shiley, who worked for the Rothschilds. We keep coming full circle on this stuff. It appears that at this point that Ron Rosenbaum's assertion, Esquire 1977, that members of the Eastern establishment who are not members of the Skull and Bones will be members of the Scroll and Key and the Wolf's Head is holding up. Now, how this book came about is Antony Sutton came across, somebody sent him, apparently there's a membership list published periodically of the, since its inception, its creation, of the Skull and Bones. And it has a part of the book says members that are deceased, and then the current members and their addresses and phone numbers. So what Antony Sutton did, and he got that aha moment, is he looked up and he said, okay, these are all the people in the order. What are they doing in the world? And he discovered the stuff that I'm reading to you, what they were doing in the world. And that was from page 37 to 92 that I didn't read. But he goes after individual after individual after individual, putting them in this part of this puzzle. Important. They're busy, and they're not fooling around. They're into this up to their neck for at least 200 years in the USA, quite active, and they've been sucking the United States dry of money since they took over the Federal Reserve in 1913, using that money to build its world empire. Meanwhile, back here at home, they're taking over all the associations, whether it's historic or medical, economic, educational, and trying to create what we think, taking away our thinking ability to see the big picture. Creating stress with economic stress and family stress and drugs and alcohol and all kinds of other propaganda and events to keep us distracted. We traced John Dewey's philosophy that education is to prepare a person to fit into society rather than develop individual talents. To Herbert, who was influenced by the Swiss Pestalozzi, personal development cannot be achieved by developing individual talents. It must take the form of preparation to serve society. According to Herbert, Dewey, and Pestalozzi, Pestalozzi was a member of the Illuminati. Smarter guy than me putting Illuminati in this book, with the code name Alfred. This raises new perspectives for future research, specifically whether the order can be traced to the Illuminati. The scene shifts in the late 19th century to Yale, to Johns Hopkins University. Member Daniel Colt Gilman is the first president of Johns Hopkins, and he has handpicked either members of the order, Welch, or Hegelians for new departments. So this new philosophy where the state is supreme. handpicked in all these positions of leadership and in charge of associations throughout the United States and likely the world, versus freedom and that the citizen is supreme. G. Stanley Hall, the first of Wilhelm Wundt's American students, began the process of Americanization of Wundt, established the first experimental psychological laboratory for education in the United States with funds from Gilman, and later started the Journal of Psychology. John Dewey was one of the first doctorates of the Johns Hopkins under Hall and Morris, followed by Woodrow Wilson, who was president of Princeton University before he became president of the United States. We noted that Wilhelm Wundt's family had Illuminati connections. As we remember, Fritz Springmeier wrote the book Bloodlines of the Illuminati, and these people do intermarry. A lot of people know this, to keep the DNA high, so that they probably have this stronger relationship with this reptilian DNA. As bizarre as that sounds, we're going to examine more of that material. But apparently there's a lot of historic information that I've gone over in previous videos, that there's entities behind the scenes that have lived in this planet under the oceans or underground. Some people believe have come from space and everything, and that are part of these groups. So why, I guess, if these people are these elitists and they had this experiment of freedom and it's not working out for them, maybe, so they have to switch over to the communist system. The order was able to acquire all of the Morale Act land grants. So apparently back then they had all these land grants for universities and colleges and educational institutions to help educate we the people. But apparently these Freemasonic types, Skull and Bones and other Illuminati types, managed to gain control of those land grants. Entitlements for New York and Connecticut, for Cornell and Yale respectively. However, member Gilman ran into trouble as president of University of California on the question of the California land grants and corruption among the university regions. The first organized opposition to the order came from the San Francisco Times, but editor Henry George was not fully aware of the nature of his target. John Dewey, the originator of modern education theory, took his doctorate at John Hopkins under Hegelians. Dewey's work is pure Hegel in theory and practice, and totally inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States and the rights of the individual. Children do not go to school to develop individual talents, but to be prepared as units of an organic society. Experimental schools at University of Chicago, Columbia University, fanned the new education throughout the United States. In brief, the order initiated and controlled education in this century by controlling its content. The content is at variance with the traditional view of education, which sees each child as unique and the school as a means of developing his uniqueness. Criticism of the educational system today bypasses the fundamental philosophical aspect and focuses on omission. I'm wearing out my tonsils. All right. That the kids can't read, write, or spell, or undertake simple mathematics exercises. If we look at the educational system through the eyes of the order and its objectives, then the problems shift. If teachers are not teaching basics, then what are they doing? They appear to be preparing children for political objectives, which all happen to be the objective of the order. The emphasis is on global living, preparing for a global society. It is apparently of no concern to the educational establishment that children can't read, can't write, can't do elementary mathematics, but they are going to be ready for the brave new world. So here's a summary of the order's influence in education. So I'd like to say that it is my opinion that the people have lost their discernment. They see the look-say, as we started this video, which was a teaching method for the deaf and dumb. See the picture and think something. See the picture and think something. And so they wanted to bring that dumbing down of America into the American classrooms, to the American people, the look-say. And I also know, and most people will agree, that generally speaking these days, people are staunchly Republican or staunchly Democratic. Those of us that are independent and can see the truth, we don't buy into that paradigm. Because the Democrats hate the Republicans, and the Republicans hate the Democrats. And they're all misguided and have been trained by the look-say method. You ask somebody, well, the Democrats are for people. Social benefits. The Republicans are for money. And the Republicans say, well, we're trying to start businesses and rationalize, and those Democrats are just leeches off society. This is what they teach the Republicans to think about the Democrats, and what they teach the Democrats to think about the Republicans. Obviously, a huge lies and propaganda. So I'm going to finish this up here with Memorandum Number 9, Conclusions and Recommendations. A general conclusion is that the order has been able to convert the educational system from one aimed at developing the individual child to one aimed at conditioning the child to be a unit of an organic, i.e., Hegelian society. So they're trying to prepare everybody to be part of this communist New World Order with the gay agenda, Agenda 21, sustainability, biodiversity, all this global warming, threats. And the state will save you by enacting laws and forcing you to voluntarily give up your freedom and your property and your God-given right to think and be an individual. At the time of Sputnik, there was a hue and cry about the backward nature of the U.S. training in mathematics and science, which at the university level are not at all backward. Anyway, the educational establishment recognized an opportunity and cried, more money. They got it, and there was a massive expansion in the 1960s. But the funds have been poured into social conditioning instead of educating people. Social conditioning. It should offend people watching this video to realize that we have been socially conditioned, including me. I didn't wake up until 10 years ago when I went on a vacation to Costa Rica. Saw the posters on the airport wall not to have sex with women under 17. And I found out there was a huge prostitution society built on it, people coming from around the world. And the cops are running around with billy clubs, and the people were all passive and docile. And then I went to Jaco Beach, sitting at a tiki bar, having a beer, having people from all over the world said they felt sorry for we Americans because we didn't know who was controlling our country. And I came back and I started doing research to disprove what they said, but I couldn't. They were right. And you read a book like this, and you see how deep they are into our psyche, into our business, and trying to take away our supreme right to be in charge of our country. That biodiversity material I went over, look it up. They want to fence off more than 50% of the United States where no human can walk, except them, of course. And then a buffer zone around all that, so that they can give nature some right to live. It's nice sounding stuff, but the objective is not nice. Mathematics and sciences have taken a back seat in the last 30 years. Private and parochial schools, believe this or not, listen. Private and parochial schools provide an education closer to the common school idea than do public schools. So you're likely to get a better education in a private or parochial school to make you be a person with a philosophical outlook, i.e., you can think for yourself, and not with the look-say method, where you think you're a Democrat and Hillary's got to win and you hate and seethe at the Republican candidate, and vice versa. There's something wrong with that. But it's the old Jewish war tactic of divide and conquer, as well as other warring groups use that tactic. You notice you don't see too much of Israel at the headlines of the Syria and the Russian thing going on now with Saudi Arabia and Greece. But you know Israel's behind it all. Part of these Hegelian philosophies. The state is supreme. If you read the Talmud, if you read Professor Higger's book, if you read Bloody Zion, all those other books I went over. Mystery School of Babylon, Luciferic worship. Private school students learn more than public school counterparts. Coleman wrote, "It is paradoxical that Catholic schools function much closer to the American idea of the common school than do public schools. Private schools provide a safer, more disciplined, and more ordered environment than public schools. Blacks and Hispanics perform better at private schools. The reason private schools are less under the influence of the Dewey educational philosophy. They still have to use accredited teachers, but these teachers, quite bluntly, have been able to survive the teaching, training, conditioning." Just reading my highlighted portions here, just trying to make a point here. There's more behind the scenes of these skull and bone characters like George Bush, John Kerry, and all the other politicians that come from one Freemasonic lodge or organization, Council of Foreign Relations, Heritage Foundations, all these elites with all the money behind them, taking over the American Federal Reserve in 1913 under their man in this book, Woodrow Wilson. World War II was contrived. Germany didn't want to go to war with the USA after it had been beaten the first time. But the powers behind the scenes fixed that. They picked a fight with Japan by supplying arms and weapons to China and denying oil and scrap metal to Japan. And Japan and Germany had an agreement. If you went to war with one, you went to war with the other. So the people who control our United States, the order, the death head here, took our young men and women into another war, World War II. You would think that the United States people would be outraged that we allowed these people of the order and the other Mystery School of Babylon lodges and temples to use and abuse us and have some social planning in our future where we lose all freedom. Enlightened social engineering is required to face situations that demand global action now. These are things that you ought to think about. Social engineering. In the fall 1983, a report by John Goodlad, Dean of the School of Education at University of Southern California, will be published. So he said, enlightened social engineering is required to face situations that demand global action now. So they're going to create the situations like global warming so they can social engineer us. Parents and general public must be reached. Otherwise, children and youth enrolled in globally oriented programs may find themselves in conflict with values assumed in the home. So they don't want you to have values that your parents teach you. And more, page 345 of Global Baloney. He calls it Global Baloney. Nothing about the child as an individual. Nothing about the child as a repository of talents that need to be encouraged. Nothing about basic education and the 3 R's. Now remember though, I keep saying, the Jewish folks, and not all Jewish folks, take people like Rabbi Marvin Antelman or Henry Mackau, who wrote the book, The Illuminati, the Cult That Hijacked the World. Henry Mackau, PhD, Jewish author in Canada. And go look up Zionism and images and see all the Jewish people protesting the Zionism and New World Order. They know what's going on behind the scenes. And I'm showing here that for 100 years they've infiltrated the education system, the medical association, historical association, economic association, everything. They really want to bring about the New World Order. And apparently they hate we the people. Alright, so some of the proposals by these people: education should start at 4 years old. Schools should be smaller. Head teachers with doctorates should have more pay. And this does nothing, of course, to stop what the former Commissioner of Education called the rising tide of mediocrity. If the United States is to survive in the coming technological intensive age, then certain recommendations follow. These are: the functions of the school is to develop individual talent. Social engineering as an objective has to be discarded. Well, they're not doing that. A thorough grounding of the 3 R's is essential for a good education. They're not doing that. It follows that schools of education should be abolished. This is under serious discussion at Duke University and has been proposed by the University of Michigan and even Cal Berkeley. Schools of education should be abolished. Teachers' credentials should be based on subject matter entirely, not educational theory. All restrictions on private schools should be abolished. Public schools should be returned to local control. I'm for much of that. So I read all that other material, and name after name, situation after situation in this book. Antony Sutton shows that all those people named as members of the Skull and Bones were put into places, jobs, positions throughout the years with the aim of changing the way we all think as free people. To not believe in the Constitution, to not believe that we're the ones who make decisions, but rather the state makes decisions. And this is going to be a fight to the death for a lot of us. A lot of people are not going to go along. The mark of the beast, as in the Bible, microchipping people. Who's going to go along with that? A lot of the cattle will. A lot of the people that they've educated into this look-say teaching thing will take the mark of the beast. And people who get Social Security checks, pensions. It says in the Bible you won't be able to buy or sell. And I'm saying there's something higher than we humans, evil behind the scenes, planning a major event to bring about this New World Order. People need to wake up, think. And prayer works. I believe that there's more to our reality than these biological bodies. We are spiritual beings, after all. So when you do pray and you do obey the 10 Commandments and treat your fellow man like you want to be treated, those are powers that you have over these people who want to promote the decadent, perverted lifestyles and the insane TV programming I've been watching that makes people look like nasty animals. You're paying attention to some of those shows. Gotham, the TV program, even the Texas Rangers, they just make some people to be devilish people. Destroying humanity rather than making it something better. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.